Yeah, there's a lot to talk about. Let's get into it. So last night, Donald Trump cried and complained and tried to do this thing where he wanted to justify the SAVE Act, right? It's this super restrictive federalized elections scheme that he wants to put together to manipulate the elections, to basically purge people off the rolls and make it more difficult for them to register to vote in a country where the plurality usually doesn't vote, even though they're voter eligible. And obviously the Republicans want to make that even harder so that there's like 12 total people in the country actually voting, and every single one of them happens to be a billionaire and also very pro-Israel. So like that's basically the system, the perfect system that these guys would live with if given the opportunity. And they absolutely hate it when working class individuals vote. So they try to do everything they can to make sure that those who do vote, working class individuals who do vote, are making decisions off of faulty data, faulty information. Our elections are stolen by moneyed interests. So there is no real democracy, right? We'll get into this Hamas poll, the Harvard-Harris Hamas poll, in a second. Obviously, I don't want to talk about my impact like this. If you ask the ADL, that is, of course. I'm not going to take credit for any of that, obviously. But we'll look at the full poll. We'll look at the full poll in a little bit. But as I was saying, so Donald Trump, president, 47. Came out of the gate swinging last night. They promoted this speech like it was going to be a real game changer, like this was going to shock the world. It was going to shock the people's conscience. And as I told you ahead of time that it probably wasn't going to be the case, it was a little bit of a whimpering fart. It wasn't necessarily this world-changing incident. It was just more so a decrepit old man that's lost his sauce, that's lost his fastball, that kind of understands that he's no longer as popular as he once was, trying to get ahead of the upcoming midterm elections where he is very clearly going to receive a significant blow. Elections are popularity contests. You can consider them to a certain degree a mandate, right? And it's clear that the Democrats, in spite of their worst judgments, are probably still going to do fairly well. You can thank our movement for that as well. They never will. They will endlessly seek to punish us for it, but that's besides the point. That's neither here nor there. Regardless, Donald Trump wants to get ahead of that and do everything in his power to basically manipulate the elections, purge people off the voter rolls, that kind of stuff. Now, the problem is a lot of the things that he talked about, if not everything, was already readily available. This is information. None of it was new. The additional speculations off of the readily available information, that's, I guess, somewhat new, but it all ultimately tied back to the SAVE Act. This is what he wants to do, right? We covered this in great detail yesterday, and I will continue to cover it today as well. More Pegasus is coming after fans. Of mine? Okay, we'll look at that in a second. My entire community is international commerce. Individuals that work with the beautiful nation of Singapore, he better not do that. He better not come after the other shipping magnates in this community. So, why the deflection for Trump's points? The Chinese stole our vote list by Googling it Chinesely? Yes. My favorite point, I will just come out of the gates with this, okay? Right off the jump. Got to wash my hands of this really quickly. I am Chinese, okay? I am white Chinese. I know I keep saying to people that I'm not Chinese, but it turns out if you don't like President Donald Trump, you are Chinese. And I don't like President Donald Trump, so I guess I am Chinese, and we are all Chinese. That was the argument that he tried to present last night. Now, of course, I'm joking. He didn't say you're literally Chinese if you hate me, but he did say you have been duped by the Chinese into hating me, the big, beautiful president. So that was really fun. It's like Russiagate, but somehow worse, because like obviously there was a decent amount of evidence that Russia tried to interfere and at least like engage in influence peddling in the 2016 elections. Liberals greatly overemphasized the impact of that because they were coping with Hillary's loss. But this is far worse than that because, one, there's no evidence whatsoever, not even enough evidence to suggest that there was genuine interference by the Chinese in our election. But also on top of that, Donald Trump took that to say, China is hurting my feelings personally. I'm the president. China is making everybody hate me. It's the funniest version of Russiagate that they could have designed. So much respect to the Republicans for constantly pushing the needle. Let's hear what this guy has to say.
Press last night, where he continued his campaign to cast doubt on the 2020 election he lost and the 2026 midterms he fears losing. He did it by making a series of misleading claims and citing dated intelligence that failed to demonstrate any votes were actually compromised. Senior political correspondent Rachel Scott is at the White House with the latest. Good morning, Rachel.
George, good morning to you. And Republicans on Capitol Hill were hoping the president would focus on immigration, on the economy, issues they believe will be important to voters this midterm election. But instead, the president came before the American people to talk about an election that he lost 6 years ago, using unfounded claims to demand sweeping changes ahead of the midterms. With the midterm elections just 4 months away, President Trump taking to the podium in prime time to sow doubt in America's election system, making misleading claims about the election he lost 6 years ago.
No country can be great without fair and honest elections. You have to trust your country.
In a 25-minute speech, the president making extraordinary and vague claims that officials he appointed in his first administration were part of a cover-up to keep information about foreign interference and election fraud away from him, arguing newly released documents would show efforts by China to interfere in our elections and expose flaws in the voting system.
They're vulnerable and they're easily compromised, and people within our government knew that.
But the president provided no evidence that the outcome or any votes were altered in the 2020 election. And his claims deeply...
By the way, got to give a shout out to the team at this hotel. They wrote a little note when I first came in. They got me Diet Mountain Dews. And they wrote a little note. They were like, hopefully your visit to DC is Stunlock free. And they got me 4 Diet Mountain Dews, which is crazy. Hasanabi heads are everywhere, bro. It's awesome. Sorry. It's a nice touch. Feel like I'm Austin Shell.
Contradict the assessments his own intelligence...
If there was a fraud, does that mean his win was illegitimate? No, you see, what you're trying to do is apply logic to the situation. And in order to understand Donald Trump, you can't do that. That's a big mistake. Because you think there's any logic to what Donald Trump is saying, when the answer is there simply is none. Okay? That's your big problem. It's okay. Everyone makes this mistake. Everybody makes this mistake. Because it doesn't make sense that the election was stolen. The election integrity was fine in 2016 when Donald Trump won the election, even though he still complained after his victory, if you guys recall. And then Donald Trump became president, but then the election was stolen from under him while he was president. And then Joe Biden became president. But then when Joe Biden was president, he fixed the election system again so that Donald Trump could be president again. None of it makes sense, because if you're the president, if you can steal the election, as Trump is claiming Biden did, while Trump was president, from right under his nose, why wouldn't you steal it again? Why wouldn't you use the election theft button and slam it extra hard to make sure Donald Trump doesn't become president? You're now the president. The libtards are the president, right? The libtard party is in charge. The Chinese Communist Party is in charge. Why wouldn't they just continue doing election theft? None of it makes sense. But none of it has to make sense because, let's be real, these are not the brightest crayons that he's painting with, okay? Donald Trump isn't necessarily a very intelligent guy, and his fan base is even dumber than he is. So obviously, it doesn't have to make any logical sense whatsoever. You can't say too big to rig either, for the record. You can't say that because it was bigger last time around. Like, Donald Trump got more votes in the 2020 election than he did in 2024. So that also doesn't really make sense. Like, he got more votes, but then I guess like they rigged it even harder in 2020. So why didn't they rig it just as hard in 2024? This is an understandable question to ask, right? Right?
Officials gave him in 2021 that China did not attempt to influence the presidential election outcome. Trump lost in 2020 by 7 million votes. He lost the Electoral College and lost more than 60 court cases challenging the election, some in front of judges he appointed. And there's no evidence of widespread voter fraud, something his own attorney general at the time acknowledged. Still, the president has been fixated on unfounded claims of voter fraud, demanding Congress pass the Save America Act, a sweeping voter ID bill, alleging his administration found more than 275,000 non-citizens on the voting rolls.
Yeah, no. Chairman Zhu Baideng of the Communist Party of China, the General Secretary, lifetime chairman, the premier, he's got it all. He's all of it. Zhu Baideng. He's the man. He is our guy, and he did it for us, and he did it for us, the International White Chinese Association, the International Association of White Chinese, which is all of us. Now, the 275,000 non-citizens were on the voting rolls was actually an interesting one. That was probably one of the only like actionable things that he could point to. And it turns out, guys, this might come as a surprise to you. He was lying about that too. Now, he wasn't lying that there were, like names that needed to be taken off the voter rolls. He wasn't lying about that part. It turns out they weren't like non-citizens or anything. I mean, some of them might have been, but for the most part, they were just like dead people. So, a thing that happens. So that should probably come as no surprise to some of you, but I know many of you are big-time Trump fans, and you think that Trump never lies, and he's the best, and when he says something, it's obviously the most truthful thing that anyone's ever said. So yeah. Did Trump get more votes in 2020 than he did in 2024? I thought he did. I thought 2020 was the most votes that any Republicans ever gotten. Maybe I'm wrong. I could be wrong. Let's take a look. Okay. Fake news alert. While I was talking about Donald Trump, turns out I might have been doing fake news. How many votes did Trump get in 2020? Why is there no like normal, just fucking straight up answer, dude? In the national popular, Biden received 81 million. Trump received 74 million. So he got 74 million votes in 2020. And I believe he got like 70 million in 2024, if I'm not mistaken. We can Google it as well. Turns out I was right, and chatters that were casting doubt on what I had to say might have been wrong. Let's take a look. How many votes did Trump get in 2024? 2024 United States presidential election. Oh, wait, no, he got 77. Okay, no, chat was right. I was wrong. He got 77 million. I was wrong. He got more votes this time. You know what? Too big to rig. It turns out, my mistake. It turns out he did actually rig it. Or, sorry, the Democrats couldn't rig it. It turns out it was too big to rig. That's right, baby. That's right. That's my goddamn GOAT president right there. Too big to rig. I apologize, Mr. President. I know I'm in your presence right now. I'm in your city. You know, my mistake. My mistake. I was wrong. You know, this is a big problem. Fake news, a big problem on the left. Too Big to Rig is such a good trucker gay porn title. Oh my God. Yeah, the unbelievable L here is for Kamala, going from 81 million votes to 75 million. That is insane. I mean, it's not just because it was Kamala Harris. Let's be real. It was also because it was Joe Biden. Okay, did you check in with T-Man? I did not inform T-Man that I was coming into his hood. NBC TikTok was actually
I'm reading
good.
through the White House's documentation now, and they say that over 250,000 non-citizens were found when they looked at the voter rolls of 4 states. But when you dig into that, what it's clear that they did is they analyzed the public voter rolls, the kind of voter rolls that I can buy if I have an Amex and, you know, a willingness to spend a few $100s for the public voter rolls, and put it through a federal database that once was used to administer benefits. Now, this database has been reworked by the Trump administration to try and use it for election officials. But early reports show that when you put voter rolls through this, and I'm talking the private voter rolls, the kind with social security numbers, the kind that are much more accurate than the public voter rolls, when you put people through that, you often end up with lists of newly naturalized citizens who this database, it's been reworked and jerry-rigged, finds lots of newly naturalized citizens who are being flagged as potential non-citizens. And when you put public data through that, it's going to come up with incredibly inaccurate lists. There is little indication to show that the White House's documentation actually has that many non-citizens. Occasionally, non-citizens show up on the voter rolls, but not nearly as many as the president is saying. There's also no evidence of the fraud that he said was occurring, because you have to actually vote as a non-citizen to be committing voter fraud. So
yeah, in order for, I mean, even if a non-citizen is accidentally on a voter roll, which mistakes can happen, this is why I said our elections have integrity. And the reason why I'm confident in that is because we obsess over it. It's mostly the Republicans that obsess over it. But I guess in this circumstance, it's not even fair to say it's just the Republicans that obsess over it. Obviously, like, there are a lot of commissions, bipartisan ones, that are making sure that the elections are correct and they're fair and they're free and all that stuff. But like, What's crazy is there, like, we know that non-citizens don't vote. And yet we know that non-citizens do not vote. And yet Republicans just say it all the time. And they've said it so many times, not dissimilar to how they claim that, you know, non-citizens are violent and responsible for the crime rates and all this stuff, that if you repeat a lie long enough, it just becomes the truth, especially if the oppositional forces in the country are not fighting back against this misinformation. And Democrats have been fairly insufficient in their response to especially the idea that, you know, undocumented migrants are responsible for tremendous amounts of crimes in this country. So that's more so just like a meta commentary on truth and not having any consensus reality and whatnot. But we just know that that's not the case, right? Oh, look, it's the terrorist sympathizer, dog shocking, dictator loving buffoon. Okay. Thanks, chatter. You really owe me on that one. How do all the media keep discussing if his claims are based in good evidence instead of talking about why he's bringing up his baseless claims again in the lead up of the midterms? I mean, I think the media is aware that he's lying. They're covering it fairly. I mean, they're covering it with accuracy. It's just that right now we're kind of in a holding pattern. We're at the mercy of Donald Trump's whims. Like, if he decides to go in one direction, it's you know, it's just frustrating because we don't know what could take shape in the upcoming days. I suspect that he will use the Department of Homeland Security. I believe Mark Wayne Mullen also did a press conference on like the actions he's going to be taking and things like that. But yeah, I mean, he wants to make sure that people don't go out and vote against him and against the Republican Party. So we'll see.
But at no point did the president prove people cast ballots who shouldn't have. Election officials across the country quickly responding. Nevada's Secretary of State saying there are numerous protections in place to prevent non-citizens from casting a ballot. And in Pennsylvania, the Republican Secretary of State telling the New York Times, all evidence has shown that non-citizen voting is extremely rare across the country, including in Pennsylvania. Democrats warning that President Trump is laying the groundwork for challenging future election results.
He's laying the foundation to be able to tell America after Election Day that the election was corrupt and therefore should not be respected.
I mean, that's the best case scenario for the record. Guys, what we're talking about here is the best case scenario, that he's like not capable of doing something before the elections to like impede on people's rights to be able to go out and cast a fucking vote. The best case scenario currently is 4 months from now, Democrats go out, they vote. Obviously, there's a lot more enthusiasm for them to go out and vote than the Republican base, because either some people are, why are you such a fucking doomer? Wait, what? Dog, you've been in here for 31 months. My job is to analyze the day's news and sometimes offer what I think might happen in the future. And unfortunately, the day's news is fucking grim. Okay? It's grim all the time. Newsflash, a lot of things suck. Okay? A lot of things suck. Big dicks and big balls, which is why I'm going to keep telling you exactly what's going on without trying to, offer you any sort of, without lying to you, basically. I'm not going to lie to you, okay? And yet you won't game. All right, well, shut the fuck up.
We just got word from both China and Russia. They're rejecting the claims that the president made last night. As he closed his speech, he demanded that Republicans on Capitol Hill pass the Save America Act. This is his voter ID bill, which would require proof of citizenship to register to vote. It would also severely restrict mail-in voting. But the president does not have the votes to get this through Congress. And what's more, that bill does nothing to address what the president spent most of his time focused on last night, these allegations of foreign election interference, which again, his own intelligence agencies at the time.
I was wondering where the fuck the noise gate was coming from. I just realized, like, okay, chatters weren't wrong. There is a little bit of an echo because the HDMI. Okay, I just fixed it. There was an issue with my audio. Turns out the fucking noise perverts were correct.
Said was just simply not true, George.
And Rachel, at the same time, the president also focused on profits. His media company announcing plans to profit from the president's social media posts.
Yes, George, the president's media company will now sell quicker access to President Trump's social media posts on his social media platform, Truth Social. Users will be able to pay for immediate access to what the president says. The president has a history of announcing major things on Truth Social, from military action to domestic and foreign policy trade deals, long before we even get an official statement from the White House. And that's what has watchdog groups particularly concerned, that this could give another way for President Trump to profit off of the presidency, George.
Right, because so many of those posts have also been about companies the president has invested in.
Good afternoon. A question from Reuters. US President Donald Trump declassified intelligence on Thursday that he maintained showed Chinese interference in US elections, despite a US intelligence assessment that found no evidence Beijing affected the 2020 vote that he lost. Does the Foreign Ministry have any comment on this, and will President Trump's comments affect bilateral relations? Thank you.
美方的有关说法纯属无中生有、恶意抹黑，早已被证明是无稽之谈。中方历来坚持不干涉内政原则，没有兴趣，也从未干涉 美国大选。相反，是谁动辄干涉别国的内政，长期无差别的监控全球各国政府、企业、普通民众，大规模的窃取他国公民的数据，国际社会看得清清楚楚。我们敦促美方反躬自省，停止无端的抹黑中国，不要在选举中拿中国说事，多做有利于中美关系的事。
First of all,
Yeah, China came out and said, this is not correct. Y'all are fucked up. Also, they might as well say we love Donald Trump while they're at it, because why shouldn't they love Donald Trump? Donald Trump has been the greatest gift to Chinese soft power. Okay? Donald Trump has been the greatest president for China. In approximately 2 years of his second term, Donald Trump caused so much instability around the world and destroyed American soft power initiatives, destroyed the international design that we had not only created ourselves, were the architects of, but also were safeguarding for almost a century. Donald Trump threw that into the fire, lit the world on fire, quite literally and figuratively, and created so much instability and undermined critical allies all around the world to such a degree that now, unlike ever before, when people are polled around the world about China versus the United States of America, they prefer China to the United States of America. That is incredible. I mean, that is insane, right? America had so much soft power. America had so much goodwill. Many might even say goodwill that it didn't deserve. And Donald Trump lit it all on fire in an alarming, record-breaking pace. This is perhaps the reason why they call Donald Trump the great nation builder for China, in the People's Republic of China. That's what they know him as. So for Donald Trump to turn around and act as though, China's making everybody hate me, well, it's kind of funny. It's just like, simply put, it's the most narcissistic thing that you could possibly do, where you never look within for any blame. You never take responsibility for your actions. And you just assume that everybody hates you not because of what you've done, but, some other person made everybody hate you. It must be China. You need to run it back real quick, that last question he answered, because he was definitely not saying they love Trump law. I know they didn't say that. I'm saying they should basically say that. If they were honest, they would be saying that. Behind closed doors, they're probably like, do you fucking hear this guy? This guy thinks we haven't benefited tremendously from Trump being president. Did you hear it? He said we made the world hate him. You made the world hate you, motherfucker. What are you talking about? Like, think about this, dude. 100 years of soft power, 100 years of global hegemony, okay? And on top of that, we're talking about even a much more powerful social force, Orientalism, racism. Like, China has always been seen as like the great menace, right? Throughout its century of humiliation, it's an area for colonial plunder. And past that point, since its revolution, it's always been a menace. It's at times been a great and valuable ally to American foreign policy in the region to use against the other real enemy, the USSR. However, ultimately, from the perspective of the rest of the world, whether it be the Asian countries around China or whether it be countries in Europe, China has always been seen as China's always been met with suspicion, right? China's renewable energy revolution is fantastic, but at what cost? Like there's there's a whole meta here in the Western world, in Western media specifically, that continues this suspicion against China. Suspicion that I think is unwarranted. That's my personal perspective, but suspicion that very much existed for the longest time. And there's polls to prove that. And yet, now, more people around the world favor China over the U.S., Pew study suggests. And it's really funny because everyone knows exactly how this happened. Everyone except for Donald Trump. Donald Trump is the only person, perhaps the only person in the country, and maybe his, stupid cult, that doesn't realize that Donald Trump alone is responsible for this attitude shift. Most Americans still don't like China, and yet most Americans also don't like Donald Trump. So clearly, something doesn't add up, right? We are in the minority of American citizens that actually don't have a negative opinion of China, but also despise Donald Trump. We are literally a tiny sliver of the American population. If you look at the American population, for the most part, they're not exactly super favorable. Now, obviously, the American population's opinion on China has changed dramatically for the better as well, but we're still nowhere near where other countries are, right? So it's extra funny that he is laying the responsibility of the hatred that people have, the very real, palpable hatred that people have, Americans have, and the rest of the world has towards Donald Trump, in the hands of the People's Republic of China.
Department of Homeland Security, we've identified 250,000 non-citizens registered to vote in just 4 states. Mind you, we have 46 other states. In just 4 states, we've identified 250,000 non-citizens registered to vote in California, in Pennsylvania, New Jersey, and Nevada. We also worked with proactive states to identify 28,000 non-citizens on their voter rolls, plus 400,000 individuals that are still registered to vote that are deceased. Now, these 23 states, they proactively worked with us on the SAVE program. That's Georgia, Ohio, Tennessee, Texas, North Carolina, Idaho, Alabama, Missouri, Louisiana, Kansas, Arkansas, Wyoming, Montana.
Wow, it kind of feels like these red states got a real problem.
Iowa, Florida.
How the fuck do you respond to this? I don't know. You just fucking say the truth. You identify what they're saying. You identify what the problem is, and then you keep repeating the truth over and over again. At this stage, not to go back to the meta commentary here, but at this stage, like, it kind of doesn't matter. The Trump supporters are going to believe this no matter what, and they're going to believe even more far-fetched claims, as a matter of fact, and the rest of the country is going to be like, that's stupid. So the best you can hope for is like people in the margins that are maybe half paying attention to this stuff, that hear what the president says and go, wait a minute, that's crazy. And then you try to patiently explain to those guys who are not a part of the cult that that is wrong. And that's all you can do. That's all you can hope for. And continue to let the material conditions wither away and create so much instability, so much chaos, so much anger and resentment that, like, his base gets smaller and smaller and smaller until they are in the margins. What proof would it take you to convince you that even a portion of this is legit? The last 30 years of investigations from independent commissions, right-wing think tanks, liberal think tanks, to have not conducted extensive research on the integrity of elections to show that American elections are actually pretty reliable, and there's no evidence of voter fraud beyond, like, margins. Like, the greatest example of this is the Heritage Foundation, right? The Heritage Foundation rolled up their sleeves and got to work, okay? they conducted the most comprehensive study on voter integrity and election integrity and voter fraud, because obviously this is a major right-wing position, right? So in order to justify this major right-wing position, they had to go and find some evidence. So they did. Problem for them is they looked at billions of votes that were cast over 3 decades, and they found that approximately 1,200 to 1,400 instances of voter fraud had taken place. Over billions, over 3 decades of elections, local elections, state elections, presidential elections, they only found 1,400 to 1,400. I don't remember the exact number. So they disproved their own theory while they were trying to create sufficient evidence. That is the reason why an extraordinary claim such as the one that the administration is making require extraordinary evidence. And yet, there is no extraordinary evidence. There's not even any evidence whatsoever. Which is precisely the reason why they're leaning into silly things like this. They're leaning into whatever they can to be like, oh, well, let's cast some doubt. As NBC News also reported and explained, some of this is newly naturalized citizens that haven't been updated in the registry, and therefore the Department of Homeland Security or the administration is making it seem like these newly naturalized U.S. citizens are actually non-citizens and technically are not allowed to vote when they have that. And are all these release docs all fake, you think? No, my friend. What the administration is doing is take speculation and investigations that were conducted and delete the conclusion of the investigations. Okay? So it would be similar to this. The FBI claims, let's say, I'm making this up. In a hypothetical scenario, the FBI claims that they have suspicion that 100,000 people illegally voted. Okay? They go in and they find in their investigation that there are dead people that needed to be purged from the voter rolls to the tune of like 10,000 people, let's say, right? So the first number is 100,000. The suspicion is 100,000. They find 10,000 people that were not taken off the voter rolls even though they had died. But then they take it one step further, as investigators are supposed to, and they look at who has actually voted even though they're dead. And they find 0 instances, or let's say 1 or 2 instances of people voting past the point of their demise. Okay? The FBI will look at this data and will conclude, as they did, this intelligence assessment that they're releasing is readily available information since 2021. The FBI will come out and say, as they did in their intelligence assessment, not just the FBI, but the entire intelligence community, right? Will say, there is no evidence of voter fraud and that the election integrity remains absolute. There's no real evidence of voter fraud beyond the margins. It's not even like there's no concerted effort. We did not find in our investigation that there was any concerted effort to thwart the outcome or disrupt the outcome of American elections. And that's our conclusion. Like we dug deep, we investigated, we found that there wasn't any real evidence for our elections being tampered with by foreign countries. They might even say they attempted to extract information, right? But ultimately they did not succeed. If the Trump administration comes in and chops the conclusion of that investigation and simply says there was suspicion that the FBI had reliable intelligence that 100,000 fake votes were cast, not only did they delete the conclusion, so they're lying by omission, but then on top of that, they actually lied in the front end of that too, because they lied and made the initial theory into a hard fact. That's just lying. Simply put, they're both lying by omission and they're lying by exaggerating the claims and by claiming that those claims weren't claims at all. They were actually the conclusion of the investigation. That's what they did last night. I don't know if that was simple enough. I hope I was able to explain it. So there are numerous ways to tackle these arguments. Obviously, one of the funniest ones, the ones that I like the most, are the simple ones. The simplest way to ask this question is like, so the elections were fucking stolen under your watch, but then they weren't stolen when Biden was president? Hold on. 1 second. Hold on 1 second. Sorry. Have you talked about Trump's speech last night? Yes, that's what we're talking about currently.
Florida, South Dakota, Indiana, Arizona, South Carolina, Utah, Nebraska, Michigan, and my great home state of Oklahoma. Real ID.
Yeah, for the record, the simplest question to ask people is, so the election integrity was compromised under the Trump administration when Trump was president, and he lost the election, but then Biden became president, and then Biden actually fixed the election integrity, so Trump won again? How does that work? Right? This is it. So the elections were rigged under Trump's watch, but then Biden fixed the election rigging, and that's how Trump won. Because that's the argument he's presenting. It makes no fucking sense. It literally makes no sense whatsoever. None of it makes sense.
Does not prove citizenship and does not give you the right to vote. You must be a U.S. citizen and you must be eligible to vote. Before and after the election, we will scrub all election records looking for illegal aliens and those who are ineligible to vote, including those that somehow voted, yet they were deceased. If you're illegal and attempted to vote, or you tried to vote illegally for someone else, we will find you and we will charge you.
Yeah, no shit, dude. That's always been the law. It's literally the same as saying, hey, if you go out and you shoot a grandmother in the face, we will find you and we will prosecute you and you will go to prison. Yeah, wow. What a revelation. Oh, I didn't know that. I didn't know that it was illegal to vote as a non-citizen. Of course, that's always been the case. It's just an unbelievably rare situation. It does not happen. It does not happen at all. Okay? That's the problem. That is the issue.
Illegal voter registration and illegal voting both carry penalties up to 5 years in prison and up to $250,000 in fines. We will pursue maximum pressure on this. Yeah, so let's talk about the major networks not willing to carry the President of the United States address to the nation on election security. How shameful is that? I think it was ABC, NBC, and I don't know if CBS, did CBS carry it? Anybody? CBS carried it. So ABC and NBC not carrying that, why? What are they trying to cover up? Why wouldn't they want to inform the American people? Why are they calling themselves a news outlet if they're not actually trying to put the news out there? We wasn't giving spin on the election. The president wasn't trying to...
Yeah, The greatest gift that the outlets gave Trump was to not cover his stupid fucking speech, which, by the way, perfectly fair, perfectly valid for major news outlets not to carry this ridiculous fucking speech and then instead discuss how many lies he repeated on it. But it also is like a win-win, I guess. It's a win for some of the major outlets, like keeping their integrity or what remains of it. And it's a major victory for the Republicans because now they have something to bitch about. Okay? Now they have something to bitch about. It's their favorite thing. Oh my God, you guys are being so unfair. Why wouldn't you let the president lie to everyone on primetime television? Especially lie in a way that many people have been successfully criminally prosecuted over, whether it be doing January 6th, whether it be, criminally prosecuted and then released when Donald Trump became president again, unfortunately. And for Fox News, for example, there's almost $1 billion penalty sitting on the other side of that. Last time they carried Donald Trump's speech and didn't address some of the nonsense that Trump was actually entertaining and even leaned into some of that nonsense. So obviously for Fox News, they don't want to risk it again, right? But now they get to complain. They get to complain about how the media has undermined our big, beautiful president by not allowing him to fucking lie on television. It's not like they're not carrying it at all, mind you. They did. They just, chopped it up and made it easier to address, especially because he was lying.
Litigate what happened in 2020, although he definitely could at this point. The president was giving facts. What we have exposed, what the Biden administration covered up, what the intelligence community held from the American people, Congress, and the executive branch, and we're putting it out there. And yet, two major networks didn't want to cover it. I think the question really should say why. Because they sure covered the other part of it when they were saying that it was the most secure election ever. What facts did they have? Because they didn't have facts. They were taking someone's word for it. President Trump gave facts. Today, we're giving facts.
Vital resources.
Yeah. One of my favorite moments from last night's events was watching Fox News right after the speech. Now, Sean Hannity loves Donald Trump. You guys know this. He's the number one brown noser. And Sean Hannity came on live right after Trump's riveting speech about how the American elections were stolen, about how China had participated in this election fraud, and about how China had made everybody hate the big, beautiful president. Sean Hannity complained about CNN not running the speech and maybe gave like one statement after and immediately moved on. That's how you know. That's how you know even the Republicans were not really trying to entertain this stuff. If you got Sean Hannity not covering this stuff extensively, if you got Sean Hannity not going deep into all the claims that Donald Trump made last night, obviously, even the Republican media apparatus is not very confident in the information that Trump was delivering. And of course they're not confident because it's ridiculous. In order to avoid a potential Dominion lawsuit, Fox News even came out and literally openly stated after Trump's claims that Fox could not independently verify the statements Trump was making about the elections. They straight up added that, content warning. Makes you think. Trump is running out of allies. Trump has a lot of enemies for good reason, but he's certainly running out of allies. He's at the end of his rope. This movement is dying. The MAGA movement is now propped up by some of the most insane people. And when I say insane, I know it's a term I use a lot, but I mean like literally mentally ill, maladjusted, genuinely unwell, physically unhealthy people. It's the core of this movement. It's the evangelical Christians that are chock full of white supremacist values. And even those guys are experiencing the economic shock of Trump's ridiculous militarism in the Strait of Hormuz. And even those guys are beginning to recognize that maybe Donald Trump is not fixing the prices in the way that he claimed he would. Better yet, maybe some of them are even getting frustrated because all he talks about is like transgender and liberals and all this stuff. Meanwhile, he said he was going to end these wars and he never did. And he's starting new wars. And now those wars are starting to be impactful, starting to impact their bottom line, hurting their wallets. I predict a lot of people, especially on the Republican side, are going to sit out this upcoming midterm. They're not going to go out and vote because there's nothing to vote for. Trump is not on the ballot. And there's not much to look forward to. And even the comfortable ones are not going to vote because usually the comfortable ones, well, they don't have any reason to go out and vote. Trump is not on the ballot again. He has become far too narcissistic for the average person to follow and to, show any loyalty or sympathy towards. The last people that remain, the last holdouts, are going to be the most insane, the most zealot folks out there. But it's cooked. His movement is dying.
Make claims that electronic voting machines are vulnerable and easily compromised. Fox News has not seen that evidence yet, is not in a position to evaluate the accuracy of the president's statements and claims at this time.
Here's the problem. If you consolidate power around a narcissistic, petty, despotic tyrant like Donald Trump, he's not going to use his lame duck period, which he's in now, to set up a comfortable future for the movement. He's going to use the consolidated power that he has on dumb shit like this, a messaging operation, to try to make himself feel better, to prosecute his enemies if he has any motion, any clout that remains. He's not doing this to prop up a better future for the Republican Party because he's not a movement man. Trump has made it very clear from the start. There's only one guy he cares about. That's Donald Trump. He'll enrich his friends, his fail sons, his immediate business partners that he has like a unique relationship with now, whether they be Silicon Valley techno-feudalists, or, the oil and gas industry. But even then, he'll burn them on a moment's notice. This guy burns his allies. So what makes you think that he is going to care about a broader Republican movement? He does not. He doesn't. He is the movement. And the Republicans hitched their wagon to this fucking petty tyrant like a bunch of morons. And these are the results. But of course, remember, a petty tyrant on his way out can still do a lot of damage. And he is trying to do that right now. So don't feel comfortable. It's important to understand that their incompetence is an advantage for us. But even an incompetent tyrant can still do a tremendous amount of damage, right?